Thank you, Dr. Oliver. We're now going to answer questions from our audience. Again, type your questions into the questions box and press send. Also, as a reminder, if you are requesting pesticide credits from this presentation, don't forget to sign out of the presentation, go to the audience chat box and type your first name, last name, and the states for which you are requesting credits. And at this time, we'll take the first question. All right, Dr. Oliver, why is Captan not likely to induce resistance?
So that has to do with the mode of action of Captan. So it has basically a multi-site mode of action. So essentially all the fungicides disrupt some protein or some part of the life cycle of these different fungal organisms. And a lot of them are very targeted. They disrupt a single process, that's involved in the fungus producing spores or elongating the cells or in different steps. Well, Captan kind of does a lot of different things all at once. And so if you can imagine fungicides that attack one single part of the fungal life cycle, the fungus can mutate like maybe one gene or a couple genes and overcome that fungicide and to become resistant to it. But for Captan, since it attacks a whole lot of different parts to the fungal life cycle, the life cycle of all these different fungi, it's not likely to induce resistance very easily.
Any more questions?
Saying one more word on Captan real quick while we have a second. It is a fairly important fungicide to use for fungicide resistance management because we don't have a lot of other fungicides like it. Xyram is another alternative, and I guess there's a question about that right now. And so Xyram is a possible alternative. It also has multi-site mode of action. It's a fungicide that is labeled for blueberry. However, as I mentioned in my presentation, I believe there is a restriction with Xyram that it cannot be used more than 3 weeks after full bloom. And so that is a problem for its use after that time. But up until that time, it may be a reasonable substitute for Captan if Captan is not available. And so I believe there were a couple different questions about that.
Yeah, the next question was, you answered part of it about the substitute, but they was wondering why Captan was why there was a shortage of Captan.
I have actually not heard that until very recently, so I'm not sure that I can speak intelligently and answer the question whether it's a rumor or truth that there's a Captan shortage.
Okay.
And I see another question about bacterial wilt. So originally in Florida, when bacterial wilt was moving around, and they were believing initially that it may have been associated with a nursery that had moved plants around, and that's where the bacterial wilt came from. I believe ultimately they did some sequencing of the different isolates of the bacteria they found in different places causing bacterial wilt, and found that they were not all terribly similar to one another, which suggests that actually strains of Ralstonia that are already present, because it affects a lot of crops and has a lot of different hosts in the Southeast. Ralstonia that maybe was already present at some of the locations actually was what was causing the bacterial wilt. Could be a nursery association, but that data suggests that maybe it's not specifically associated with nursery movement. That is a concern, and that's where we looked first was growers who were growing varieties from Florida that maybe they'd got them from Florida nurseries for our survey, but we don't really know if there's really any association with nurseries, though it certainly could move on nursery stock potentially. I think it's probably likely that it's that these cultivars that are being grown are much more susceptible perhaps to the bacteria, like Indigo Crisp, as we saw so far in Georgia, are much more susceptible. And so maybe planting those in a location where there maybe was Ralstonia allows it to start causing disease. We don't really know. It moves around really easily, could be coming from nurseries, but we don't have data to say that for certain at all.
Should we be banning plants from Florida nurseries?
Well, so yeah, I sort of addressed that in part. So we don't really know for sure whether it's coming from nurseries in Florida. And once it's in Georgia, it could certainly move around in Georgia nurseries. But growers should be aware of the plants they're getting, and we're trying to do some trace back on that to see where this may have come from. But right now we don't have that information.
Is phytotoxicity likely to be worse with Captec 4L versus Captan WDG or DF?
You know, I don't have any experience that would suggest that any of those are more phytotoxic than the rest of them. It would depend on how they're mixed. You know, follow the label, but no, I don't have any information on that. And it says, can Xyram be tank mixed with switching the DMIs? Check the label. It does indicate it can be tank mixed, I believe, with some products, but I'd have to double check on which ones it can be tank mixed with. But the label will indicate that. And I'll probably, if there really is a cactus shortage, and I've been getting a lot of questions about it recently, I'll be posting some information on the Blueberry blog about Xyram, and I'll be sure to address that there. The UGA Blueberry blog is found on the web, so I'll address that. But yeah, it can be tank mixed in some cases.
That's all the time we have. Thank you, Dr. Oliver, for your time and expertise. To all the attendees, thank you for attending this presentation, and don't forget to sign out for the pesticide credits in the audience chat box. All education presentations will be available for you to access until April 30th, 2021. So come back if you missed a presentation or just want to rewatch one, or if you need to search for a service or product provider in the virtual trade show. Again, thank you for your participation, and this concludes the presentation.